This is the Portfolio Rubric Guidance for First Grade Standard RLKID 3. Using graphic organizers or including written details and illustrations when developmentally appropriate, students are able to describe characters, setting, and major events in a story using the key details. When assessing the standard, please keep in mind this is using a narrative text. This should have a make-believe story, not an informational text. When assessing for levels 0 through 2, the teacher is assessing the student's ability to identify the characters, setting, and events from a narrative text that the student is familiar with from multiple read-alouds in class. So again, this should be a text that the teacher is using in class with instruction, and it has been read multiple times aloud to the class. When a student is at levels 0 through 2, the students need prompting and support to answer the teacher's questions. When assessing the standard, please keep in mind that an event is anything that happened in the story. Major events are the important events that happen at the beginning, middle, or end. Those important events are the events that shape the plot of the story. To assess, the teacher is asking the students questions to determine if the student can tell them the character, setting, and events after reading a familiar text. The student must identify the character by name for the character to be correct. Under suggested prompting and support, the teacher may have a book available for the student to look at while asking questions. Other examples of prompting and support could include story webs and charts used during class during the shared reading of the text. The questions that the teacher asks the students during the task are not prompting and support. They are part of the task. For levels 3 through 5, the teacher is assessing the student's ability to answer the questions independently without prompting and support. So again, the teacher is going to read a narrative text that is used in class that has been read aloud to the class several times, so it is familiar to the student. After reading the familiar narrative text, the teacher asks the student to describe the characters in the text. The teacher also asks the student to describe the setting or settings if there's more than one. And finally, the teacher asks the students to describe what happened in the story, the major events. Remember, major events are in the correct sequence of what happened first, next, and last. Students will use graphic organizers to provide key details and descriptions, which are adjectives, to describe the characters, setting, and major events. Graphic organizers can be drawings or written details. When assessing levels 6 and 7, the teacher is assessing the student's ability to also include how the character felt or responded to at least one of the major events. This is aligned to the second grade standard 2 RLKID 3. The suggested task gives examples of questions that the teacher could ask to determine if the student is able to identify the character, setting, and major events. The required method of evidence collection for levels 0 through 2 is a video recording of the student's responses and an answer key to the questions asked. The answer key must be provided along with the video so that the scorer is able to understand what answers the student should be giving. The answer key can be uploaded into the context narrative, or it can be an additional artifact in the student's sample. Again, this is a verbal assessment, so it should be a video recording of the teacher asking the student questions and the student answering the questions. If the student is using prompting and support, we must be able to see the prompting and support. This is not a written assessment for levels 0 through 2, and students should be assessed individually. For students who are at levels 3 through 7, the required method of evidence collection is a student writing piece or a graphic organizer. The teachers can submit a graphic organizer where the student has described the characters and major events with details, or the teacher can submit a student writing piece that includes writing and drawings if the student chooses to draw, describing the characters, settings, and major events with details. For levels 3 through 7, this is not a verbal assessment. The videos will not be accepted as evidence for levels 3 through 7. A student written piece must be submitted as a student artifact for levels 3 through 7. After you have assessed your students, it is time to score the student work. A rubric is provided to help with scoring the student work. The student work receives a level 0 if the student is unable to identify one of the following: the character, the setting, or a major event from the story. If the student, with prompting and support, is able to orally identify 2 of the following: character, setting, or major events from the story, then their student work receives a level 1. If the student receives prompting and support and is able to orally identify characters, setting, and major events from the story, then the student work receives a level 2. So again, level 0 through 2 is with prompting and support. For student work to receive a level 3, the student must independently, without prompting and support, identify all 3 of the following: more than one character, the setting, and major events in the story, recalling the events in sequence using a graphic organizer or an individual writing piece that includes written details and or illustrations to describe one of the following: characters, setting, or major details of the story. Remember, to describe, the student must use adjectives. And if the student is successfully able to independently identify all 3, more than one character, setting, and major events in the story, recalling the events in sequence using a graphic organizer or an individual writing piece, which includes details and or illustrations to describe 2 of the following: characters, setting, or major details of the story, then the student work receives a level 4. If the student is able to independently identify all 3, character, setting, and major events, recalling them in sequence, and is able to use a graphic organizer or a writing piece that includes written details to describe all 3, characters, setting, and major events, then the student work receives a level 5. Remember, levels 3 through 5, the student does not need prompting and support. They are answering the questions independently. In addition to level 5, the student also describes how the character felt or responded to at least one of the major events in the story. If the student is successfully able to do that, they score a level 6 for their student work. If a student is able to, in addition to level 5 work, also be able to describe how the character felt or responded to at least one major event in the story, and the student also describes a major challenge from the story, then the student work receives a level 7. So please keep in mind the prompting and support, the amount of information they are provide, and whether they are identifying or describing. And that is what you need to keep a close eye on for the rubric. For levels 6 and 7, you will need to upload evidence of successfully completing level 5 for the score to also be able to score level 6 and 7, because it is in addition to the level 5 work.